Welcome to the Spirit of a Badass, where we celebrate stories of courage, hope, and resiliency. I'm your host, Alecia Jacobson. Hello, my badasses. Welcome to today's episode. Today's episode is about women's health, and it's something that I am extremely passionate about, which, you know, if you listen or have any connection to me on any of the socials, something you might not know is that I was training to be a birth doula at the same time that I was training to be a personal trainer. And I did one birth as a kind of doula in training, and it was hard. I was really good at it. I actually really loved it. But the idea of you're basically on call for a month, and I was not quite a single mom at that point, but my children were like 1.5 and I think 3. So that was not exactly conducive. So I did the one, and then I was like, I can't do this for my life. But birth, childbirth, taking care of your body before, during, and after birth are things that I am extremely passionate about. I don't talk about it much because it's not really part of my world anymore, unless somebody comes into my world and this is something that they're, having in their world. But it is so important, and it's something that I think is not talked about. The options that we have. We sort of, as women, have this idea of, well, this is just the way it is. We just deal with it. And that's sort of the message that we are given. I had an amazing doula, and she was my first introduction to like, holy shit, I have some power here that I can use, and I have options. My friend is here today to talk to you. My guest is Jess Dufault. She is a pelvic physical therapist specializing in pregnancy, birth, and postpartum recovery care, a birth coach, and certified Body Ready Method Pro. Welcome, Jess.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here today.
Oh, me too. I think the last time I think we connected was I think it was right before COVID, wasn't it? Or was it a year before COVID? I feel like we were right on the cusp.
That is really funny you said that, because this morning I was trying to remember and I was like, maybe it was a couple years ago, but in reality, I think it was like 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was the January. So before going full in on coaching, I owned a gym in Verona, Wisconsin, and Jess came in and we had a packed house for that workshop.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yes. And she gave such an informative workshop to a huge group of women. And I do think that was like the January before the world shut down.
Sounds about right.
So that being said, we have worked together before, and she has such great information to share with the world. There's just a lack of information out there. There's not like you're a woman, start here. Here are all the options. Here are all the things. And I remember back when I first started training, this was a long time ago, a woman was talking to me about pelvic physical therapy, and I had no idea what it was. And I had already had 2 children and was in my 30s. Like, that's not okay. So tell us a little bit about you and is this always what you wanted to do? Kind of maybe how you arrived here? Because one, you need to follow her. We're going to have all Jess's information in the show notes, her social media. You have to follow her social media because she is entertaining and also like education. So you get the entertainment and the education with it. So you have to stop and do that like now.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that about social media, because sometimes it's so hard, like how things are landing for people and if it's working or not working. And so I really enjoy it, and it's great to hear that other people get some benefit from it as well. So thank you for that. Yeah, and so I've been a physical therapist for, well, many, many years. And it wasn't until my pregnancy and my birth experience that I realized that I really didn't fully understand the depths of the pelvis and the pelvic floor, and that I wish I'd known more of that prior to my birth. And that's coming from somebody who's, quote unquote, an expert in the human body, right? And I thought, well, if I don't fully understand this, then most people giving birth probably don't have a lot of this knowledge and awareness and information either. So immediately postpartum, I took a deep dive into my pelvic physical therapy training. And 10 years later, by the way, I haven't stopped. It's really all I'm studying and all I'm doing now in clinic and with the online component of things as well. So,
Can you tell us, because like you said, you didn't know, I didn't know. Can you explain what is it that you do? Why would someone come to you?
yeah. Well, I think there could be a variety of reasons, but one of my passion projects right now is starting to work with women really early on in their pregnancy to help them just feel better in their bodies. There's a lot of changes that are obviously happening, and pregnancy is a time that a lot of things can just start creeping in and showing up. Some underlying factors that may have been there are now just exacerbated with the pregnancy. And so I just want to help people feel really good in their bodies and keep them active and keep them doing the things they love to do, helping them care for their, if they have other kiddos without, pain or discomfort. And so that's a really big piece of what I do. They may be experiencing pain or urinary difficulties or difficulties with their bowels or maybe changes in sexual health. There's really a spectrum of the support we provide there. And then one of my newer passions in the last couple of years has been really helping people prepare their bodies for birth in a way that I wish I had done and I had known prior to my birth. And all of that in an effort to hopefully make the postpartum recovery a little smoother, a little easier, coming into that with a little more awareness and education and support in that early postpartum period can go a long way in the physical healing, but also the mental and emotional piece of that as well. And so I spend a lot of time, especially on social media, in that kind of realm of things. Um, and then, of course, there's a lot of support for people who are postpartum. If they do experience perineal tearing or a prolapse or having any unwanted symptoms, there's a lot of support for that. Because although the work I do around the birth prep is great in learning how to control the things we can control, we know that birth is unpredictable and sometimes things just happen. And that's why I'm here as a pelvic physical therapist supporting people postpartum as well. And then actually, I support people throughout their lifespan. So even right now, I have a few older ladies who I'm supporting mostly with bladder issues, like an overactive bladder where they feel like they're urinating all the time, like every 30, 40 minutes throughout their entire day, or with urgency where they're like, I've got to run to the bathroom and sometimes I don't make it. So that's a really great area that I can provide support around as well.
Yeah. Can you, going back to the pregnancy, early on in pregnancy, and then, after pregnancy, could you paint us a picture of if somebody were to work with you, how that would be different than if somebody didn't? Meaning, what are the ways that their body emotionally, physically could be different versus someone who maybe has no idea what their experience could look like? Just give us a contrast.
Yeah, in terms of their birth experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, what we can offer is really customizable support. If somebody's looking for, I would like to try to have an unmedicated birth, well, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how to use movement as a pain management strategy, how to use movement to make the labor and delivery process more efficient. And this is what I didn't realize before my birth, that we can very specifically educate on how to use biomechanics, so how the pelvis and the hips and the spine, the sacrum and the tailbone, how all of that moves during the birth process. And so if we can understand where we are in the birth process and where baby is in the pelvis, we can actually start to create more space and a path of least resistance. So things are just more efficient. And of course, when things are more efficient, we experience less need for interventions like perhaps suction or forceps or an episiotomy or even a cesarean birth. And so when we avoid those interventions and when things are more efficient, we have less risk for birth injury. And so birth injury would be things like perineal tears, prolapse, hemorrhoids, all these pressure issues that can. So we can really use strategies during that birth process to mitigate some of those postpartum things that I see a lot in my clinical practice.
Yeah. And that's so interesting because these are things, if you're not aware of them, you really don't know that there's a possibility of them until you have gone through the experience and then you've had them. And then you're like, oh shit, I don't want that, which is how you ended up here because you said, I didn't have, as an expert in the body, I did not have this kind of information as I was going through the birth process. And now when women are armed with information, I mean, there's a whole new world that opens up for them because if you think about when I've had 4 births, so I've had different experiences with different pain levels, medication, not medication. But when I had the information there, I was able to do something. And the reason that I switched course the second one is because the first one, I was like, I don't want to do that again. That was not fun. So getting this information, and that's why I really was like, you are a person that I want here, because the more this information can get pumped out there and women understand that, hey, I have options, I can kind of be in the driver's seat of this experience as much as we can. I mean, yeah, it's also unpredictable, but as much as we possibly can, I think that it's such a service.
Yeah, and I just think that's something that I really would love to reiterate is the fact that, so when I first came into doing this work, and I was supporting a lot of women postpartum, and I cannot tell you how many of them said to me, I really wish I had this information prior to my birth. And I said, guess what? You're not alone. This is why I'm doing this work. And I think that is a real factor in what kind of, so I shifted, especially in the social media world, to a lot of this. Here's what I wish I'd known. Here's what all my clients have told me they wish they'd known. Here's this information for you, because I think it's so critical. And I think a point here too is also this is not common birth education content. And so birth education courses are lovely and supportive, and they give us so much information, but this piece is missing from the vast majority of standard birth education.
Yeah. And I think it was my first pregnancy. I had pubic symphysis dysfunction, and it's still, now I still deal with it. Like there's things that I can't, like sliding, like when I'm working out, if I take a weight and just need to like move it away from me, I have to be very careful about which foot in which direction I'm moving it, because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that does not feel good. But all I was told is get a band around my hips, and I would strap that on and I would still try to keep running. And it took me a long time. And then I finally got a chiropractor after the birth. And it took me a long time to heal myself, months and months and months. And I was not able to physically, I was a runner. I was not able to do the exercise I wanted to do. I was not able to do so many of the things in my life that bring me sanity after you've had a child because this type of information was not available, or I didn't know where to find it.
Exactly. And I think that that's where it gets really hard, because it's sometimes it may be, well, we just have to deal with this because we're pregnant or because we're postpartum. Of course, we experience these things, right? And so we're told that they're common, or we're told that they're normal. And yes, that may be true, but we also want to provide a lot of support around that. And I think that's a huge piece of what I do. Because it's sometimes hard to piece this stuff together on your own. And social media can sometimes be helpful, I think, in like, oh, there's a piece of information I didn't have, and there's a piece of info that's helpful. But even sometimes that is hard to piece together for yourself, and to make sure that it's the right information for you is important.
Well, yeah, especially, I mean, all our bodies are different. your hips, your pelvis, everything is different for each woman. So yes, we can find some information online, but that is, I mean, it's sort of like, me when I sort of self-coached myself until I got an actual coach that I hired and paid to help me. It took me 10 years to do it. I mean, you got a few months, you're growing a baby inside you. You don't have all that time. You've already done you've done the work for the last 10 years to learn this and bring this gift to like birth this for the world. I mean, you are an expert. So yes, people can piece it together online, but I just, when it comes to your bodies, I think there's one where I'm like, spare no expense, because, and I understand that is also, not everybody can do that. But I think if you can, and if you can, get the information, have the support, it's just so valuable, especially afterwards.
Yeah, because, coming to see me is like taking the guesswork out of all of it. Like, I will just help you based on your goals, lay it out step by step by step. And so many people tell me like, what a relief that is, that I don't have to figure this out on my own. And, just this kind of idea that you don't have to go at it alone, I guess, is the big one that people kind of take away, even after our first session. And to know, hey, I hear that I am not broken and there's support for me. And that feels really good.
Because it is such even after when I was pregnant the fourth time, it's still, you kind of forget, or you don't know. There's lots of books, there's lots of information, but it's still your pregnancy. Each of mine was so unique, and the physical symptoms I had and my life circumstances, outside in the world were different with each one. So having that partnering, and that was where I was so appreciative of, I had a doula each time to, even the same doula each time, even though I'd already had her, I was like, no, I need you again, because I do not want to go through this by myself. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because you have that partnering component, because it can be an isolating time if they don't have somebody else who has that knowledge and understanding to be able to support them.
Yeah. Doulas rock. They are just amazing, amazing people. I had one at my birth as well. And it just, for those who have access, I think that it's just such a valuable resource for the birth experience.
And I do think, I just want to mention, because you said for those who have access, I do think in some communities, there are doulas that will go and support women in childbirth for, very little or no cost. So
I was just learning something the other day, that some hospital systems actually employ doulas, so that when you show up for your birth, they say to you, do you have a doula? Would you like one? And if your answer is yes, it's the hospital-based doula that comes in. And I think that's an incredible program.
I just got full body goosebumps. I heard that a while ago, and I don't remember where it was at, but the impact that having a support person, you or a doula, when you're going through this process, it just takes the stress out of it. Because if you think about it too, baby's inside you. And if you have all this external stress, that's all inside you moving around. So any way that you can help mitigate that stress response and gather information, because the information is power, and it helps you be more in the driver's seat and have the kind of birth and then postpartum that you want.
Yeah, information is power. And I want to reiterate that, because I think coming into a birth and a postpartum recovery, that's just really everything.
So outside of birth, so when you were at the gym, we talked a lot about bladder and bladder control and urgency. I remember a balloon was involved. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I know that's something I remember. This was after my second birth, but several years out. So before I had more, I remember being with my friend. We were getting ready to teach. I was training at a local gym, and we were getting ready to teach a class. And I sat down next to her. It's like 5 a.m. And I was like, oh, I just peed. I'm pretty sure I'm just sitting. Nothing is happening. And I just peed. And my kids, I would joke with them, no, I can't run with you right now because I just peed. Or when I do Orange Theory. So we're on the treadmill, and I go to the bathroom when I get there, and I go to the bathroom again before I get on the treadmill. So I understand that I'm a perfect candidate for your services. And also I know that I am not alone in this. So can you kind of just share just give us an overview of what that looks like in your world?
Yeah, well, first I want to say I really appreciate that you're so open about talking about this with your gym mate and your kids, because I think the more we talk about this, the more we normalize that conversation, the more we realize we're not alone, and the more opportunities we have to learn about how to change that. So I think that's lovely. Yeah, and so I'll talk a little bit about that balloon model because I think it really helps to describe a lot of symptoms that we might be experiencing with our pelvic health. And so if you can imagine that I am just holding a balloon, just a normal latex balloon. Let's make it pink just for the fun of it. And thinking about that balloon as your core is a really great way to get a big picture idea of how we provide support. The latex of that balloon are the muscles that make up the most important components of your deep core when we're talking about pelvic health. So surprisingly, the top of that balloon is your breathing muscle, your respiratory diaphragm, and that's the powerhouse of your core. The bottom of the balloon is your pelvic floor, and that sits down in the bowl of the pelvis. And then if we could kind of trace 360 degrees around that balloon, that would be your deep layer of abs, or what we call transverse abdominis, or maybe you've heard it called TA. And those three muscles have to work in perfect communication and coordination in order to manage pressure. So for example, if I pick up a kid, I'm increasing pressure in that balloon. If I lift a weight, if I sneeze, laugh, cough, jump, those are all things that the balloon has to manage pressure, because what's inside that balloon is your bladder, your uterus and vagina, and the rectum. And so if the balloon can't coordinate all the pieces, guess who takes the brunt of most of that pressure? Oftentimes it's the bladder. And then we start to have symptoms like sneeze pee, or what I call peasing, or even symptoms like urinary frequency or urgency, or some people experience bowel incontinence or can't control gas. Or have a prolapse where a pelvic organ may change its position, or they may experience a hemorrhoid, which is technically a prolapse. So managing pressure inside of that balloon and getting all those pieces to work together is really, really important to manage pressure and stop symptoms. But here's the tricky part. Of course, the pelvic floor gets a lot of blame in all of this, right? And so the simple solution, and I just want to say that maybe that helps some people. And if you do that and that helps you, I think that's great. Don't change that. But if those aren't helping you, there's a reason for that, because again, there's more to the story than just the pelvic floor. And so as a physical therapist, I'm like this detective, right, coming in and piecing all of that together for you to really help hone in on like what is the root cause of this, because it may surprise you, it's not your pelvic floor.
Yeah, and that's something that the do your Kegels, that is basically that's what we're just told to do. That is the solution. I remember, this is so funny. I remember I had a Post-it note, a very small Post-it note on the dash of my car, and it said, do your Kegels. And I went and got my oil changed, and it was where you get out of the car and then you come back in. And I got back in. I didn't notice it when I got out. And when I got back in, I was like, oh my goodness, here I have this Post-it note right on my dash. But that just goes to, I don't know if I had a medical professional tell me that, or if this was, I think Google was a thing then. But that was if you have a problem with incontinence, that is the solution. It is do your Kegels. And that is not necessarily.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really funny. But you're right. Did you feel like that was helpful for you? Did you feel like?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. And let me just briefly talk about why that may occur. So sometimes the bottom of the balloon is actually overworking. The pelvic floor is actually overworking to compensate for maybe other parts of the balloon that aren't as efficient. And in that scenario, that latex is a little more rigid, is a little more tight, I guess, if you will. And so adding more tension to that system is not really going to help. On the flip side of that, Kegels might help somebody if their pelvic floor is underworking, so they're having a hard time getting it to contract. But again, we don't really want to just isolate that muscle. We want to retrain how to do a quote unquote Kegel with pulling in other parts of the system as well, because they never work in isolation. They all work together every day, all the time. And then a third thing of why Kegels might not work for someone is it may not be a strength issue. It, again, may just be a coordination issue between all of the parts. And so we work a lot on making sure the system stacks. We talked about that in the class I did at your gym, where sometimes in pregnancy or postpartum, or even not, we can stand in certain ways that might put that balloon at a disadvantage. And so, really, even sometimes, if it's not a pelvic floor or a core strength issue, sometimes just working on alignment so that things can automatically function better is really all people need.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's just a matter of giving your body better access to a system that already kind of knows what to do if the environment lets it do it.
Ooh, will you say that one more time? Because I think that was really powerful.
I don't know if I can remember it, but let me try. So I said, sometimes it's just about giving your system better access to what it already naturally knows how to do by setting up a better environment for it to do its job.
Yeah.
I think that was close.
Yeah. Yeah, that was because your body does know, and that what you're talking about there, and it's just it could be just a small tweak to allow your body to function optimally.
Can I share one more thing I
Please.
just thought of with any of your listeners who might be jumping around and losing urine? So kind of coming back to this idea of, well, it may not be doing a Kegel, it may not be tightening your core. There's three really simple strategies that can be super, super helpful. The first one is a lot of times working on your stacking of your posture when you're jumping. So a lot of us are actually leaning a little bit back when we're jumping. So we kind of talk about leaning a little bit forward from your ankles, again, just to give your body that natural access to that core balloon without you thinking of kegling or tightening your tummy at all. So that first tip I would give is lean forward from your ankles. The second tip is, believe it or not, where your eyes are looking is a big deal. So if you're looking forward or up, we recommend looking about 6 feet ahead of you on the ground. Again, just a tip that helps you stack your system. And then the third tip, and this surprises a lot of people, is just to really focus on your inhalation breath as you're jumping. Sometimes those three things, without doing a single Kegel or a crunch, is just going to help you manage pressure better and to avoid that jump peak.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I knew because, working in training, your eye placement keeps you in alignment. However, I didn't know this little piece of it, of that is another reason why the alignment is so important.
Yeah, it's important for pelvic health too. And it's a big piece of what we provide support around.
And then the inhalation. So can you run through a scenario? And I'm going to look and see, because the workshop that you did, I actually videoed the whole workshop, and it was on the Instagram handle. I'm no longer active on it since I don't own the gym anymore, but it was Gym 608 Verona. And that was back when IGTV was a thing. I don't know if it's now Reels I don't know if it's still there.
I actually saw it the other day.
Did you?
So you must have tagged me because it was under my tagged component, and it looks
Oh,
like maybe they just moved it to a long video. I'm not sure, but I still have access to it.
okay, you do. Okay. So I'm looking here on I just see reels and stuff. But if anybody wants to do a deep dive on one of our Instagram accounts, it was like an hour-long presentation. It was amazing. I remember you had the visuals with you so you can actually see when she's talking about, the tilt and, alignment and things like that. And I'm sure that you have resources also that you can kind of point people to, because I know you have all these things on your Instagram. Could you just briefly go into a description when you're saying the breath, the exhale? What would that look like as far as doing any sort of jumping? Because a lot of the gyms or workouts include some sort of jumping. So could you just walk us through that scenario? If somebody was going to do something like that, what would that breath look like with the movement with their body?
Yeah, so typically what I would do is start somebody with this when they're lying down, because it's such an easy way. When you eliminate gravity and you're starting to tune into some of these things early on, it's just such a great position to practice this in, because here's what happens. When you take a good inhalation breath, meaning, so I talk about it as the umbrella of the rib cage. If you think about 360 around your ribs, that it's this umbrella that opens on inhale and closes on exhale. But a lot of times we've lost access to that motion for a lot of different reasons, but pregnancy and postpartum being one of them. And so when we breathe in that way, what we should notice is that the belly kind of softens and the pelvic floor actually responds to that breath. That's important, so that when you think about an inhale and an exhale, there's this flow in this relationship between the top and the bottom of the balloon. And here's where this gets interesting, because if we lose urine when we're jumping, sometimes we want to tighten everything to stop that from happening. But the strongest and most efficient pelvic floors and core systems are ones that are allowed to yield and move to accommodate the force of jumping. So a rigid system is actually going to cause potentially more stress and incontinence than a system that is actually more elastic or resilient.
Yeah.
And so what we then try to do is practice that breath in various positions on the mat, and then practice that in static standing. And then, okay, here's the trick now, practice that when you're jumping. So we do the forward lean from the ankles, we do the eye position, and then we say, okay, you may be jumping, okay, you're jumping fast, but you just focus on your rate of inhalation in that way that we've been building up to in practice.
Okay. So not necessarily does this start out at the jump. So when I talk about, we're not starting at the very top. This is starting on and I want to just point out too, I'm sitting here breathing, imagining an umbrella inside. I'm guessing that every single person listening is also like, as you're talking, like standing a little straighter and doing this breathing. So shout out to all of you who just imagined an umbrella inside you and we're taking a moment to breathe. And I'm guessing that you also feel more calm when you do that, because taking intentional breaths makes everyone calm. So let's all appreciate our Zen here for a second.
Yeah, it just brings us immediately into that parasympathetic. And I think this is really critical for all human bodies, but especially important to learn. This is the same breath I teach people during their birth process, during their contractions. It's the same breath I teach people in their early postpartum healing. But just to circle back around, there are some people who can just go straight into jumping and practice this breath. And so it's worth a try, I think, So next time you're at the gym and you're jumping around, just start thinking about your umbrella and your elastic balloon and see what happens. And then you can always kind of circle back to some of the other layers if it wasn't as helpful as you'd like.
Yeah. I love that. We had to do a lot of burpees today. I love burpees. Other people hate them. I think they're good for the mental health. I really like them, but I probably, even just to use that visual as an escape today, probably would have been helpful if we would have done this before I did that. Could have given me something to think about.
You're a rare breed, maybe, with the love of burpees.
I think that I am. I think it's something twisted up inside me that makes it. So, what else, if anything, do you think would be helpful to share if this is somebody who knows nothing other than this is the first introduction to the idea of pelvic health?
Yeah, and I would say thinking about your pelvic health, and if you have any symptoms that feel bothersome to you, that there is great opportunities in your area to be able to access a pelvic physical therapist, either in person or even virtually. A lot of people may not have access in a close proximity, somewhere where they can drive to get the services, but there's a lot of physical therapists providing virtual services as well. So even just a little bit of education and support around all of these things can go a long way. I do provide some virtual sessions for people who live in the state of Wisconsin, and they're always a little hesitant about it at first. And they walk away from the session going, wow, that was way more helpful than I thought possible. And I'm really glad we did that. So there's a lot you can do because of the access that we now have.
Yeah. And I would just like to echo that because I have sent people to you that have done the virtual sessions. And at first I was like, one, I didn't know I was sending them for virtual sessions. And then when they said they were virtual, I was like, what? How even is that? And the feedback, because I get it immediately when I have sent people to you, because their mind is blown about how just the knowledge that you have and the impact that they have after working with you for even just a short period of time. So I get the feedback. So there is a reason that I'm like, your message has to get out there because I hear it back when people have worked with you.
Thanks for sharing that because this is really helpful for me to continue to hear. And I'm just glad to hear that. So.
Yeah. So don't be worried about the over the computer stuff if it sounds like, because I too was like, what? But I have heard great feedback about it. And it removes so many barriers. I think that's just a great tool that we are all sort of thrusted into. And, we have it now. So it saves you like an hour of time too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I guess one other just quick wrap up thing is I think a lot of times a lot of women's health symptoms are dismissed. A lot of people may even request access to physical therapists and they may be told, oh, I don't really think you need that or that's not necessary. And just know that you can have direct access in most states to a physical therapist without needing a referral. And so sometimes it's just about taking matters in your own hands and saying, I want this for myself and I deserve this and I need this because of these symptoms and going for it.
Yeah. I haven't been sweaty this entire conversation, but you're going to get me hot with this topic here. Let me just say this again with a little more gusto.
Let's do it.
If you have a feeling that something is not right and you voice that feeling and you are dismissed, go find somebody who is going to listen to what you're saying. Because if you have a feeling, if you in your gut and you're like, remember, I always talk about your inner knowing, you fucking know. And if you know, then you need to go do something about it. And you need to find somebody who's going to listen to you and to give you the care that you need. And we all know you're probably going to have to go to knock on a few doors or ask people. It doesn't even necessarily have to be this kind of health that we're talking about today, but do not let being dismissed be a shut door. And you're just like, well, okay, I'm not doing anything now. No. You go banging down every door until you have somebody who listens to you. Please. There. Now I'm sweaty.
Well said, Alecia. Well said. I love it.
There's a few buttons. That's one of them. Now my face is red. I am sweating. Good. We got to have that.
I think it's important to get this passionate and worked up about it because we're our own best advocates. And I think that these conversations and just kind of getting this kind of validation from other people is really supportive and helpful for getting you exactly what you need.
Yeah. Advocate for yourself. You have to. All right. we are going to wrap this up. And the last question I ask everyone is, what tips or tricks do you have, a little hack that would save time, energy, or resources?
Okay, I'll share something that I learned a couple years ago that has been really valuable for me. And I learned this from a woman named Katie Bowman. She's a biomechanist who talks a lot about natural movement and nutritious movement. And she taught me this term about stacking. Is this something you know a little bit about? Stacking?
I don't think so.
Okay, so this is great. I'll just give a random example. So she says, let's say that you need to go to the grocery store, get groceries. You need to get exercise in your day, and you need to spend time with your family or friends. And so, what most of us would do is put those in separate little circles of time. And she suggested stacking these things. So, why not think about and planning ahead to walk to the store with your children, gather the food, and then cook together with your friends so that you are just really bringing those circles in an overlapping way. And that has been a really powerful thing for me to see. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of challenge of like, how can I stack these three things that need to fit into my day?
Oh, I love that. And what was her name?
Her name is Katie Bowman, and I'm not certain that she's the one who came up with this, but she's the one that I first heard talk about it.
Oh, I love that. It's sort of challenging too, thinking, okay, because I have buckets. I have, everything is separate and I do not let them. It's sort of like the Thanksgiving plate. Some people have it all mushed together, and that makes me sort of want to vomit a little.
I hear that.
Mine is very much not touching, and that is how I live my life. But I love that idea of how can you stack the different things and bring them together. I think it's interesting because I wonder if this is a very, I'm going to say like American thing to do, because I feel like in other countries, they probably do this effortlessly. It's not even a thought of, because I just talked to somebody and she was describing her life. And as you're saying this, I'm thinking of her. And I think that's the way they live.
Yeah, it feels like culturally a very European way to just like live life normally every day.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I like that. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. All right, Jess. Well, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your message. If you didn't already go to her social media, like I told you, will you just share what it is just in case somebody is driving? Let's just put it in their brain.
Yes, it's at That Pelvic Lady.
Okay. Unforgettable. So at That Pelvic Lady. And because you're very entertaining and informative, and you give it's great. So go over, and if this is in any way part of your world, and also share this episode, please, because this is information that needs to be out there in the world. So take a screenshot of it, tag us on social media, share it there, share it, email, send it to people who you think would get any value out of it. Because like I said, I was well into my 30s before I had any idea. Jess was an expert already and didn't have any idea until after her experience with it. So let's get ahead of this and start getting this message out there and empowering women prior to them being like, well, shit, I wish I would have had this information before. Like, let's pump this out there. All right, Jess, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I am so glad we have the time to do this together.
Yes, thank you. Spirit of a Badass is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Alecia Jacobson. Music by Shane Ivers. We'll be back with another inspiring interview. Until then, keep your spirits high and your energy badass.